Good evening, Diane Young here from South Pacific Private, and tonight we're talking about how childhood trauma shows up in our adult life and our adult relationships. And while we're waiting for people to log on, we might just do an acknowledgement to country. So we acknowledge that we're here today on the land of the Gayamagal people, part of the Eora Nation. The Gayamagal are the traditional owners and custodians of the saltwater country and are part of the oldest surviving continuous culture in the world. We pay our respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. So last month we talked about childhood trauma and the impact on us as children, and then how it shows up in our adult lives. And for longer than I expected, I talked a lot about what does it look like, what does abuse look like, what does trauma look like, how does it show up, where does it come from. Pardon me. And we talked a lot about how as adults the trauma, unchecked and unrecovered, if we're unrecovered, is going to show up in our intimate relationships and in our intimate lives. Pardon me. And I guess when I'm talking about this, what I'm talking about is how were we parented. Now, if we accept the premise that many of us have experienced childhood trauma and many of us have been unaware of the deep impact that's had on us, and there's usually a point in our life where maybe one or two relationships haven't gone the way we wanted, we are trying to show up in our life in a really functional way, it's not coming together the way we would like, and we start to realise that perhaps we are the common denominator. So it's like, what am I going to do about it? Interestingly enough, oftentimes in South Pacific I've worked with clients where they've had children that are probably primary age kids themselves, and the adult has suddenly realised that they're starting to parent in a way that they're not happy with, and that will propel them to go into some sort of recovery and therapy. So if we're talking about, as we are, we're going to talk about abandonment and neglect on one hand, and we're going to talk about enmeshment on the others. And as I said last month, Americans call enmeshment being parentified. So that's where you are brought up to be of more significance to one parent than the other parent is. And often you'll see my wonderful drawings here. You're going to love this. So if we're talking about mum and dad, 3 kids. So we're talking about mum and dad up here, 3 kids here. Now in a functional family system, mum and dad work on their relationship up here so they can guide each of the children into functional adulthood. In a dysfunctional family system, what will happen is one parent will pull up a child here to be of more significance to them than this parent is. This child will often be referred to as the favourite, the golden child, the special one. Other people in the family might say they're spoiled. But if you've been in this sort of family system over here, you will understand what I'm talking about. Now the secondary thing that happens when you're in that sort of system is that there will be a schism between this parent and this parent. It's like this parent energetically knows that this child is getting from this parent what they want. This is what we call, in Australia we call it enmeshment. You are brought up to be of more significance. You are older than your years. Often it will be, there will be a parent will be sharing with you things that are not age appropriate. They might be sharing things with you about finances or sexual relationships with the other parent or anything like that. In fact, I had a client here the other day, and he was raised in a family system where the father was very violent and alcoholic, and he would step in. The young boy would step in to protect the mother and the other kids in the family. And of course, this man's now working through all of that. And there was the significance of that is that as a young child he's having to protect everybody, and it's not his role. So the downside for him, aside from the obvious, is he loses his childhood and he doesn't get a chance to actually grow emotionally in an age-appropriate way. And on top of that, he's told, don't tell anybody outside the family what's happening. So he's learned, at a very young age to keep secrets. And so when we're talking about an abandonment neglect, we understand what that is. It's like we're left, we're emotionally or physically, there's a lot of withdrawal from us. Or if we're talking about enmeshment, that's what we're talking about. Now, there will be a lot of people who say to me, I was never enmeshed, and they don't understand what enmeshment is. And so if you think there's a possibility that you may have been, have a look on Google even, and have a chat with your therapist if you see a therapist or friends, because what will happen is if let's say you're enmeshed with your mum. So if I'm enmeshed with my mother, I avoid with women. So I'll go into love avoidance with women. And so I avoid intimacy with women. Now, it doesn't look like that, because what you're trying to do is have connection with people. If you're abandoned by your mother, you'll enmesh with women. You'll try and have relationships with women, and you'll become love addicted to women. Now, I'm going to unpack this a bit more. If your relationship with your father, and this has got nothing to do with the sexual preference, by the way, yours or anybody else's. If you enmesh with your father, you'll avoid in your relationships with men, and you'll avoid intimacy with men. And if you are abandoned by your father, you will enmesh with men and be love addicted to men. Now, I'm going to talk a bit more about this. South Pacific, we talk about what role do you play in your family system as a child. And when we're talking about child, we're talking sort of 0 to 18. Now that's 4 different ego states. 0 to 4, 5 to 8, 9 to 14, 14 up. What you're capable of as a 15-year-old is very different to what you're capable of as a 4-year-old. So you go through different stages. If you are from a family system, say, let's just talk about with your mum. It happens with men too, dads, but let's just talk about mum. So let's just say that you're the firstborn child and mum enmeshes with you. Now, a lot of the time, she doesn't know she's doing that. She has no idea of that she's doing anything. It is as significantly traumatic for an enmeshed child as it is any other sort of abuse, and we talked about that last month, the various levels of abuse you can have. Physical, emotional, sexual, social, intellectual. Enmeshment is as significant. So what will happen is you will be sitting in a position as a child where you're falsely empowered. That is, you're not equal to, you're one up from. So if you sit in a position of being falsely empowered, it will be very difficult for you to have significantly intimate relationships with people, because your primary parenting wound is enmeshment, and it will mean that you sit in a place of being better than. You will get very good at taking care of other people. You'll often be walled in and invulnerable in your relationships. You might actually look like you're really connecting with people, but you will be giving them not much of yourself. You will look fabulous on the outside, good and perfect. Your dependence is, you're anti-dependent. It's like I have no needs, no what's like I don't even know what they are. And moderation is, well, you'll be out of control with being in control of others. So you're constantly on the lookout to make sure that you're trying to control the outcome of other people's lives. you'll be doing it very artfully too. Usually I say to many clients, it's like when Miss Charming comes out, you know, we're very charming about the way we try and control other people. Now, the behaviour before coming into recovery on any level will be that you'll be unavailable. And you may not look like you're unavailable, but you're actually not giving much of yourself. So you're unavailable, you can present as passive-aggressive, your anger's never clean, you look all powerful, you will often be direct, move towards love avoidance, and I'm going to unpack that in a moment, and you're prone to caretaking and you seek intensity in your relationships. Now, if your primary parenting worm in this instance as a hero, the firstborn, is that you're, from an enmeshed background with a parent, what you'll recognise as you start to unpack this is your parent was boundaryless with you. They had no boundaries. And you will carry, as the child, you would have carried all the emotions for the parent other than shame. So when you start to work with getting aware of how you do your relationships, you'll start to realise that when you're carrying emotions for the parent, from a childhood perspective, you will carry all of them except for shame if you're in the hero role. Now, for many of you, you know that there are only 8 emotions. And if we can sit in the emotion that we had at the moment we have it, or very soon around the moment we had it, we will get the gift. So the classic one I often talk about is, if you get angry about something and you can own the fact that you're angry. It's like, I'm really angry, you're always late, it really feels like you don't value my time, or whatever it is you say. Very appropriate to be angry in that moment. But if you stuff your anger and you push it down, and you're from a rageful family system when you're a child, you're gonna that rage, anger is going to sit in rage, and you're going to have rage attacks that come out sideways in inappropriate ways. Now, the classic is when you're driving. But if you don't get angry, and people say that to me, I never get angry, I think, well, it's not going away. Like, it's still in there somewhere. So if I'm sitting in a place where I can't express my anger because I'm frightened of it, I will stuff my anger. It will come out as rage. Now, it could be internalised, that is, you turn it against yourself. And that's where a lot of self-harming behaviour come from. Substance abuse, eating disorders, gambling disorders, any sort of relationship stuff. So you're actually internalising the rage and facing it on yourself. And all the while, we've got the passive-aggressive look on our face like we'd never get angry. Like it's dishonest on a major level. If we're talking about, so that's being the hero, the firstborn. Now, if we're sitting in any other place, we could be sitting second, third or fourth, we're going to sit in and we're also from an enmeshed family system. That is, I've been brought up to be of more significance here to this parent than this one. Then if I'm sitting in that, I will sit in the place of being a scapegoat. Now, if I'm a scapegoat, I'm going to sit in both falsely empowered and disempowered. So I'm going to be all over the place. Now, a lot of addicts and alcoholics sit in the scapegoat role in the family system. They carry the shadow of the family. They can look like they're really on top of things and then look like they're not. So in terms of self-esteem, you would sit in a place of being less than others. You would get value and power from behaving badly in relationships. Your boundaries, you're still walled in and invulnerable, much like the hero. And if you have any sense of that, it's like you're not up here, you'll kind of, every now and again, you'll look like you're trying to connect, but you're not. Your reality is you're bad rebellious, which is where the acting out comes from. Dependency is I'm too dependent on what you think of me. I'm too dependent on getting some sort of affirmation or validation from you. My moderation is that I'm out of control. My behaviour is I'm still unavailable. I'm aggressive, not passive-aggressive. I'm more likely to be in your face than not. This also leads to the love avoidance. and I'm prone to be a very poor caregiver, and I seek intensity. Again, that's where a lot of the hook comes with addiction or mood disorder. So the primary parenting wound in this instance again is enmeshment. Your parent is still boundaryless with you because you're from that enmeshed family system, and as a child you carry the shame and any of the other emotions. So that would be fear, anger, pain, guilt, loneliness, as well as the shame. So those two, the hero and the scapegoat, both come from an enmeshed family history. The third one we talk about is being the lost child. Now, the lost child is when we're abandoned and neglected. And I think most everyone understands what that's about. Neglect can be extreme, and it totally devalues the child as a human being. I often think neglect is one of the worst things a child can experience, because they are given a message at a very young age they are worth nothing. Now, as I said before, if you're abandoned by a parent or neglected by a parent, if it's a mother, you'll enmesh with women and you'll be love addicted to women. Or what we will say in that, rather than love addicted, is you're a pursuer. That is, if you're for example, if I'm abandoned and neglected and I have girlfriends, friends, not even people I'm not intimate with or anything, just friends, girlfriends, then I'm going to really try hard to be a very good friend. And I'm really going to be leaning in and doing everything I can to get those women to be friends of mine. The same is significant with men. If I'm abandoned and neglected as an adult, as a child, and I'm trying to have relationships with men, I'm going to enmesh with men, that is, I'm going to lean right into them, I'm going to be love addicted. So I become the pursuer. The Gottmans talk about pursuer distancer relationship, and I talked about that last month. Pia Melody talks about love addiction, love avoidance. Same, just different language. Now, the third one, the abandonment, is the lost child. We call that the lost child. Now, that child is totally disempowered. And in terms of self-esteem, they sit in a place where they're absolutely less than others, and they get value from being good and perfect. So they're always behaving. The boundaries, they alternate between no boundaries, none, and walls. So they're all over the place with their boundaries. The reality is they present as good, perfect. Dependency is they're needless and wantless. You wouldn't know with a lost child or abandoned child, they don't have any needs or wants because they don't know what they are, and they were never allowed to have any as a child. Moderation is they're out of control with being manipulative of others. So that is, they're always trying to manoeuvre and feel safe in their relationships, so they're always manipulating. And I don't mean that in like the true negative way of manipulation. They're just doing it to try and feel some sort of safety in the world. Their behaviour is they're yielding and enabling. They do a lot of enabling. They're passive aggressive. They appear powerless. They're not, but they appear powerless. It leads to love addiction, which is the pursuer role. They are subject to experiencing anxiety and depression. So a lot of people that present at South Pacific with mood disorders, PTSD, they will be in this lost child realm. Their primary parenting wound is abandonment, and the parent walls out the child, and the child carries shame. They don't carry too much of anything else. Now, I want to talk now about how these show up in your intimate relationships. So this is kind of what it looks like. So if we're coming from the position of having been enmeshed with a parent, not our fault. Parents generally don't mean to do it. They just don't know how else to parent, and they're coming. You remember, we're talking about intergenerational trauma here. We're talking about great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, us. Right. Again, I mentioned that last month. So if we're coming into a relationship as an enmeshed child we're adult, by the way, but if we're coming in as from an enmeshed child history, we will come in, because the thing about enmeshment is we will sit in the position of being the love avoidant. Now, the interesting thing about this is the greatest fear of the love avoidant, we think, is the fear of intimacy. Now, you know what that means, intimacy. Into me I see, I allow you to see into me. So I think, as a love avoidant, the greatest fear I have is of intimacy. But the underlying fear is one of abandonment. So I think when I'm terrified of intimacy, but what really terrifies me more is abandonment. And so the trauma issues that I come into the relationship with are, I think it's my job to take care of needy people. That's my job, to take care of, relationally, to take care of needy people. If I don't, I'll feel guilty. And to be relational, that is intimate, is to suffocate and die. I can't, it's like, oh, I can't do this. Now, what happens for the love avoidant, or the distancer, if you want me to call it that, is we enter the relationship out of duty, not love. And that's hard for a lot of people to hear. We enter behind a wall of seduction. So we look fabulous on the outside. We've got all the right moves happening. You know, we're saying all the right things. We're turning up at the time we're supposed to. We're taking them to the right places, blah, 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 blah. So we come, you know, into the relationship behind a wall of seduction. But it doesn't look like a wall, not to the love addict. This is, if we're entering a relationship behind a wall of seduction, we're not in a position to be intimate. We can't. We actually enter also because we're very good at facilitating everybody else's life. And so we come in and we think, oh, I can help you do that, I can help you do that, I can help you do that. And I do all these things. And after a period of time, I become overwhelmed by the neediness of my partner, the love addict, and I move from my wall of seduction to a wall of resentment. What happens then is, in some way, I abandon the relationship. Now, I don't leave the relationship. I'm still in the relationship. But I do something to create distance from the partner. So I come together. This is me here, the avoidant. All good, I'm facilitating your life, I'm helping, I'm being, the perfect partner, really. And then my wall of seduction turns into a wall of resentment. I don't leave the relationship, but what I do is I emotionally come over here somewhere. And I create intensity outside of the primary relationship. Now, it's often when I do that movement, I don't even know I'm doing it, but it will be something quite justified. I've got a big project on at work, I've got to work back, 4 nights a week, or I'm going to run the marathon, so I've got to train, every night, or whatever it is. I mean, it can often be that the intensity is created outside the relationship, and it will look like it's justifiable. Or, I've got a sick parent, I must go to Queensland and stay with mum because she's unwell. Mum could quite easily manage herself. I mean, there'll be something. For people who are very unwell, they create the intensity by having an affair. And then after a period of time, they will return to the relationship out of guilt or their own fear of abandonment, or they'll move on and connect with a new partner. Now, in the meantime, so let me now talk about the love addict or the pursuer. So the love addiction cycle, their greatest fear is of abandonment with an underlying fear of intimacy. So it's the opposite. Trauma issues come from I'm worthless in relationship to my partner. That is, I feel always less than. I need to be taken care of as I can't survive alone. And if I don't get close enough relationally, I'll die. So it's like this propensity to be very, very close. Now, I will enter the relationship as the love addict or the pursuer behind a haze of fantasy. That is, I'll make up a fantasy of who I think you are. I will respond to the love avoidance wall of seduction, or the seduction that I'm getting, and I, fall for that. And I deny that the partner has walls and the importance of their life outside the relationship. And I'm actually in a total fantasy about who I'm in relationship. I wouldn't say a red flag if someone waved it in front of my face. But there will be one event. There will be an event that happens. And that shatters the denial of who you're in relationship with. Now, maybe it's something to do with family, maybe it's an affair, maybe it's all sorts of things. But you'll see, maybe they really lose their temper. And when you are in that love addiction cycle and you experience that event and your denial is shattered, you will go into an emotional withdrawal from the fantasy where you will feel all of it. Pain, anger, fear, shame, rage and panic. It is only at that point, when you are in that much pain that you think you're going to die, that the love addict will actually go into recovery. If they miss that window, they will obsess and medicate. It's like, I need to lose 6 kilos. Oh no, I need to learn to do this. I need to learn to ski. He'll love me more. They'll love me more if I do this. I need to be a better parent, whatever it is. Assess and medicate in the relationship, whereas the love avoidance, obsessing, creating intensity outside. The love addict is obsessing and medicating in the relationship. Now they'll do that for a time. When that doesn't work, they'll either return to the fantasy, stay in the relationship, or they'll move on to another relationship. So what it looks like is this. This is the avoidant, this is the addict. So we come together, oh, this is fabulous. And the avoidant, after a period of time, goes, I'm feeling too overwhelmed. They don't say anything, by the way. It's all internal. And will emotionally move away. Hasn't left the relationship. So this one, the addict, the love addict, will follow. Right? So this one's turned around. The love avoidant knows that the addict's here. They know they're trying to get their attention, but they don't turn around. This one, the addict, then gives up in a way and also emotionally leaves. So you've got one over here emotionally obsessing outside the relationship. This one is obsessing and medicating within the relationship to try and make it work. After a time, the avoidant realises that the addict's left emotionally and they will come back. And then, oh, this is fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. And then this will happen and they'll follow and they give up and then comes back. We call this the love addiction, love avoidant dance. Now, there are steps that you can take if you play this, if this is what's happening, which is all coming out of your childhood trauma. So the first thing we've got to do is unpack the trauma. And the next thing we do, and we have series of specialised programs at South Pacific where we do, the 3-week intake. Changes 1, which looks at your childhood trauma, 0 to 18. Changes 2, which looks at how it turns up in your life as an adult. And changes 3 is the love addiction, love avoidant, where you actually unpack your relationship history. It's critical that we make the commitment to do this, because the alternative is that we continue to do this. And every time we're in a relationship where someone's leaving us emotionally or not, or coming back, we're making up a story that we're not worthwhile. And given it all comes out of our self-esteem, our lack of boundaries, how we sit in reality, what we do with dependency needs and moderation, and how it shows up in our behaviours, will indicate to us how much we actually learn to get comfortable with our intimacy and not frightened of our abandonment, which all comes from our history. Now, I've gone through all of that, and I again have talked much too long. I'm sorry, but I do know that there's recovery from love addiction, there's recovery from avoidance addiction, and the first thing we do is unpack the story. We get very clear about where we sit. There will be some people who flip-flop into both, and I think that happens a lot because we might have been meshed with one parent and abandoned by another, so we have to actually get clear about that. But what we have in fact is we're working with how we were parented, how it shows up in our life as an adult, and then how it shows up in our life, in our intimate relationships. And our intimate relationships are not just about our intimacy and our relationship and our partnerships, but it's also about our friendships and our colleagues and all of the things that have come to us in our adult life. There is help available. Is it easy? No. Is it worthwhile? Yes. Is there a way to be able to navigate our way through it? Yes. You do the program at South Pacific and you start doing some work on this, you'll find that there are plenty of avenues, and certainly the aftercare plan you'll leave the hospital with will have access to therapists who can help, and you know, I think that's a great thing to have that available in Australia. We have a lot to thank Pia Melody for. So just before I finish, I just want to say thank you to those of you who logged on. I just want to learn, does complex PTSD make this attachment more difficult to break in relation? Well, I think this all comes out of complex PTSD. If we have PTSD, it's usually an isolated incident, traumatic. Complex is there's been a series of them. And my experience of complex PTSD, it usually starts when we're little. So I don't think it makes it more difficult. Yes, it makes it difficult. Is it impossible to recover from it? Yes, it is. So Heinz, thank you. That's great. That's me when I was an orphan. I'm glad that you've logged on tonight, Heinz. Linky, thank you. That was great. And I'm pleased that it was helpful for some people. Have a look at it later. There's I'm throwing a lot of information at you about very complex issues, and what I do know as we finish up is the recovery is available. You can reach out to South Pacific. The intake office will be opened from 8:30, and the number's 1800 06 332 1800 06 332. Thank you very much.